Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Crooms, and welcome to African Americans in Sport podcast, where we dive into relevant and contemporary topics related to African American in sports. The podcast is brought to you by Dr. Langston Clark, Dr. Alvin Walker, and I, soon to be Dr. Brandon Crooms, who all teach at different universities, a similar class that introduces a general study of African American sport education. Through this podcast, you will hear from some amazing professionals in their respective fields, share exclusive, interesting, and engaging information pertaining to race and sport that you probably do not hear often. Today, the topic of discussion this session is going to be life changes, African American athletes transitioning out of sport. We have the honor of having the guest speaker who is a doctoral student, an entrepreneur, speaker, and many other things. The list goes on. And she's also a former Bethune-Cookman University student athlete, HBCU. Shout out to them.
There you go.
Miss Holmes is a former Division I volleyball player from Bethune-Cookman University and is currently a doctoral student in social work and an entrepreneur. She's transitioned from administrative roles in healthcare, education, and counseling services to develop a company to support athlete development. Through the BFCA Experience LLC, Ms. Holmes creatively combines her passion for sports and social work through workshops, public speaking engagements, and awareness in magazine features, including shout out Miami and 9 Point Magazine. She believes that supporting the athlete's journey means valuing the athlete beneath their jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Marlene Holmes. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. That's an awesome introduction. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're an awesome individual. That's why we have you on.
Thank you.
Where are you now?
So I'm currently in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Okay.
Here for a while, but as you mentioned, I'm currently third year, almost fourth year doctoral student, at Barry University. So, it's been awesome. Can't complain with the weather. So, just thankful to be down here.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous right now. We're in the middle of the residual effect of a wintry storm here in Texas, but glad you're doing okay over there.
Yeah, definitely praying for you guys. Definitely know folks down there. So we're trying to help out. We, as in my team, been able to help out some folks. So definitely prayers and doing what we can to support you guys. Because it's crazy, but you'll get through it. You'll get through it.
Yes. So Marlene, she's my colleague, but she's also, I consider a friend of mine. I love watching her go about her moving around as an entrepreneur, as a scholar. She's always busy, staying busy, promoting, doing the things that entrepreneurs do, right? And so I gave you a list of things that she's involved in, things that she partakes in, and things that she established. So my first question is, how do you do it? What is your drive? What motivates you? How do you balance with being because I'm a doctoral student myself.
Right.
How do you balance with being a doctoral student, yet being an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, a speaker, all these different things? How do you balance that?
Well, it's not easy. You know me, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's one task at a time. It's delegating tasks. As a former administrator, you managing teams, you learn how to identify your individual strengths and challenges and weaknesses, and you learn how to develop those individuals. You understand what you're good at, and what you need help with. So I would say as an entrepreneur, that has been the biggest adjustment, because when you start building your own company, it's just you, right? And you learn how to master literally every aspect. You may not be the expert at it,
right,
but you learn what you need, what you don't need, the time it takes, the money involved. So I would say the biggest thing is delegating tasks. So I've been very blessed to have individuals come on my team who have a like mind in regards to entrepreneurship, and believing the vision. So I would say it's balance. I'm not perfect. So sometimes that self-care concept is a struggle. And I think that's where being a former athlete, also being raised in the military, my family was an Army family. So I think, I'm programmed a little differently at times, but I think the biggest thing is delegating. understanding that I'm only one person and I
Right.
can't necessarily tackle everything. So having an agenda, having a plan, having a business plan, having a school plan, right? And also making sure that I'm accountable for
Mm,
my self-care, my
right.
goals in business. So it's been a journey of planning, of, saying, okay, this is too much, let me back up. But remembering why I'm doing this, if I'm going to talk to current athletes, if I'm going to talk to coaches, talk to parents, I believe
Mm,
that I have to be speaking in my truth. So I have to make sure
mm,
I'm living what I'm
right.
saying. So I can't
Yes.
to be an entrepreneur and do this if I'm not taking care of myself. I can't be an example of transitioning and owning your power as far as being a Black woman, a Black athlete, if I'm not owning mine and believe in myself. So I think understanding my mission and what I'm always striving to do allows me to focus and stay in path and not fall off too much.
Right. Right. That's so good. As I mentioned before, you were a former student athlete. And
Mhm.
I like to say, once an athlete, always an athlete. And when you're an athlete, for those athletes out there can attest to this, you adopt a certain lifestyle that
Yeah,
it can be hard to get away from at times. And
right.
that lifestyle is work ethic. You start to adopt these habits that kind of help you in other areas of your life if you know how to identify and to transition those skills to other venues and other jobs or skills or career occupations. But the buzzword that you said a couple of times was self-care.
Yeah.
And we talked about mental health. And so
Mhm.
my question is, like, what is your go-to as far as
Yeah.
self-care?
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge advocate of therapy. So I definitely have a therapist. As a social worker, if I'm
Yes.
talking the talk, I got to walk the walk. And I wasn't
Right.
always, aligned in that. But it's more of maintenance. You hear people literally talk. I talk about it. I'll say what I say regarding preseason, right? When
Mhm.
you're an athlete in preseason, we're working out the game plan, the physicality, getting prepared for it. So for me, when I'm in the game of life, as I
Right.
am, I have to do the same thing for my mind, for my spiritual health, as well as, just personal and daily well-being. So that's one of my big go-tos, is to have that balance with that. In addition, it's, I have a good support. I have a good support
Mm.
system.
Yeah.
Over time, this wasn't something that's always been this. This was a transition. I graduated quite a while ago. I won't say when, but, quite some time ago. So it was a
Yeah.
process of understanding that I'm blessed to still have friends from college, but I've also had some relationships that had to, separate because the transition and the growth and what you're doing doesn't always align, and that's a hard part. So sometimes you have to learn, you have to go through the rough patch of connecting with yourself and understanding that you will grow and it's okay.
Mhm.
So I think the start of my self-care journey and understanding that was letting some friendships go, making
Mm.
some changes with lifestyles, realizing that, hitting up happy hours and things like that is cool, but what is
Mhm.
it doing for me? What am
Yes.
what am I, what am I running from? What am I suppressing? And that may seem deep, but when you talk about an athlete that's transitioning out, there's the pattern, there's habits that you develop. And somewhere in your life, you start to feel something pulling at you. And for me, that was God. And I had to make that transition. And again, don't get me wrong. Was she at Live on Sundays in Miami? If you know, absolutely, right? But the growth has happened. So you
Yeah.
definitely won't see me at Live on Sundays, even prior to the pandemic, because I understand what I need for myself. So for me, I love playing tennis. I got this crazy solo tennis machine that's like a tennis ball on a string. So I can literally go anywhere. So I try to find the physical component, whether it's laughing and talking with my friends, but I've developed a Bible study group with my family every Wednesday. And then on Sunday, we usually like listen to a sermon virtually together. So I find moments to feed myself spiritually, have a fun side, laughing with friends. But most importantly, it's about my environment. There's no one in my circle that I pour into and they don't reciprocate that back.
Yeah.
Um, that's a necessity, right? And in
Yeah.
this of entrepreneurship and being a doctoral student, it can be a lonely journey. And then along with that, coming from administration and healthcare, as a Black woman, I was always the youngest in the room, was always probably the only woman. And then you add, I'm a Black woman, right? In that space, not a lot of individuals I could have conversations with and explain what that experience was.
Yeah.
So I've gone through a lot alone, and I'm thankful
Yeah.
to be in a place now where I can take all of those experiences and share it, because that was the dark side of
Yeah.
coming out of sports and not having the preparation of what is it like to be in a boardroom meeting and being the youngest person, but being the most credentialed or one of the most credentialed. So there's a lot of that. So all of that is really where I am now, and that all has developed the foundation for my organization.
So good. You spoke a lot on the older adult phase of your life right now. And I mean, closer to probably mid-20s all the way up until where you are now.
Mhm.
We- We're talking about your experiences, and let's go back to your experience as a student athlete,
Uh-huh.
right? And so young student athletes going into college,
Yeah.
they're towards the end of their teenage years, adolescence, and they moving on, transitioning
Yeah.
to their early adult years. And so you spoke on also about when you understanding what self-care is for you, particularly,
Right.
there's an awareness and understanding of self.
Mhm.
And as an adolescent, you're understanding yourself, but also the identity, the title of being an athlete,
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure that comes along with that.
Yeah.
So this leads to my next question, or could you just talk about like your journey as a student athlete, transitioning to college and out of college?
Yeah, my experience is one of many, but it's a unique if you don't come from a military background. So,
Mhm.
so from sixth grade to graduating high school, I lived in Fairbanks, Alaska. So first, that's a whole different dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the beginning of my volleyball career. So I played with the same teammates, the same experience. And so that's not unusual for a lot of folks, right? But prior to that, my family moved every 3 years. So I learned very early on, from the age of 4 until graduating high school, what it's like to adapt in certain situations, how to be aware of your surroundings and your environment, understanding that you can be in this group and be in this group, have this set of friends and have that set of friends, but also knowing what it's like to be viewed on the outside looking in, being part of a military family, right? What's it like when your parent comes in uniform and is the only one, in the gym in a uniform, and it's just the norm, or even the opposite of that, the reverence that people have for
Hmm.
military. So there's a lot of different moving pieces that you really don't pay attention to as a
Yeah.
child, because it is the norm. And so in a lot of my research now, we talk about I talk about Black racial identity development. So I talk about very early on when you first started playing that sport, and William Cross talks about that pre-encounter stage. And
Mhm.
so that's what that was for me. When I went out for volleyball in 7th grade, I didn't know anything about volleyball. Nobody in my family we were a tennis family, and are a tennis family. So everyone played tennis. That's all we were going to do. But living in Alaska, guess what? We didn't have a tennis team, right? The snow's outside. So, my mother's amazing. And any sport I went out for, she's like, sure, go ahead, try it out. So I was, fortunate. Every team I went out for, I just happened to be an athletic kid and made it. But volleyball is what stuck long term. But I played basketball, volleyball, ran cross country, did track, anything I could do, I would do. So
Mhm.
with the volleyball side of it, that pre-encounter stage talks about how you start to really look around, and you start to, in some sense, conform to that,
Mhm.
in order to fit in or to feel comfortable. And it can be good or bad, but it starts to shape your identity. So
Yes.
as a volleyball player in Alaska, yes, I had somewhat of a diverse team, but there's still an image of what volleyball players look like. So, oh, they need tall socks. Oh, I should straighten my hair, or my braids should be very long. I need a little headband like everyone else. She has Asics knee pads. Let me get me some. So very quickly, it was my environment that I absorbed. So
Yeah.
that goes on, through life, through middle school, through high school. And I was only one of two from our high school team to go on to play college ball, but I wasn't recruited. You know, my other teammate that I still speak to, you know, she could afford Pepperdine summer camps and flying and being on club teams. I couldn't, right? So my recruiting process was me calling every HBCU in the country and saying, hey, what do you need? What do I do? How do I make this happen? No clue. And so that was rough to say, wow, I've worked for a sport all this time, won these accolades, and no one's interested. Like,
Yeah.
no, everyone's like, well, and then you learn about the SAT and the ACT and the clearinghouse. So that's a big part that I think a lot of people don't talk about, specifically for Black athletes and specifically for the transition and the preparation. So I would say that was my first major hurdle as an athlete, outside of winning and losing, because we had a pretty good team. But that was it. That was huge to say, wow, there really could be nothing else after this, right?
Yeah.
But I was determined, and I was able to go to a junior college in Independence, Kansas, called Independence College. If you watch Netflix, they used to have an insane football coach. So everything you see on that is absolutely what the experience was like, in the middle of nowhere. So I go from a diverse environment for the most part, always aware of my Blackness, always aware of how America viewed Black women, but I hadn't necessarily experienced the heaviness of that directly. You know, I had some issues with teachers and not wanting to acknowledge Black History Month, and I would speak up, and they would fix it, you know, but it wasn't like I had to protest and do all of this. It was like, you know, your sign is wrong, right? It's definitely February 1st. I'm going to need you to fix that. I was like, hit it, right? But that was far and few. So you talk about the next phase. Now I get to a college where the town is small, majority white, and on my volleyball team, I'm one of two Black women.
One of two.
One of two.
Wow.
And like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Okay, you know, again, I'm used to adapting in different situations. What woke me up was most of my teammates had not met a Black person, period, in their life.
Yeah.
So now you're dealing with the microaggressions, but still at the point in my life, being an 18-year-old, not knowing what to call it, not knowing how to and where to share that this is uncomfortable. So that was a tough time for me and for a lot of Black athletes at that school. Their football team was majority Black. And so, you know, but the Black male experience, I always like to say, is very different from the Black female experience. So when we talk and when I talk, I like to be clear that we have to not generalize that. There can be similarities, but the walk can be very different. And so that was a big hurdle for me. So my goal of getting to HBCU never stops, but in that second stage of William Cross is the encounter stage, right? The encounter stage can be good or bad, but it basically means that you encounter a situation or a person or something happens that makes you make a decision to go right or left. And so because of those microaggressions, because of hearing teammates use the word colored, because I'm hearing other athletes, white women say that if my father sees me with my Black boyfriend, he said that he would shoot him. What? You know, like literally look at it, what year is this? So hearing that and just being overwhelmed by, wow, there are people that literally still in this day that don't like the color of my skin. And I couldn't take it. So I had an amazing coach who unfortunately passed away in November 2007. But she was huge. She was a white woman, but she was amazing. She was not a therapist, born and raised in that town, but she became our head coach. She let me vent. She didn't judge me. She wasn't didn't take anything personal. She could see that, wow, this is an area that I never even thought about because I've never had to, but something that I need to be aware of my players, you know, and you don't see that often. You don't have a that you have that rapport with, right? So we can come back to that a little later, but she helped me get into or get to my to Bethune-Cookman. And so obviously having her support, she was pregnant and doing film with me, hitting balls at me, like someone that really believed that, no, you can do this. So that's how I got to Cookman. so thankful for the opportunity. But here, yet again, we have another transition. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that being on a majority Black campus would be an adjustment. You wouldn't think that, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm like, yes, I'm with my people. Like, let's get
Yeah.
it, man. Like, let's go, right? It was like a culture shock. It
Wow.
was an adjustment. And, you
Yeah.
know, for me being a military, like, it was like everything. I come from just a diverse community where we celebrate everyone.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone on base has their month just about, and it is what we do. So it didn't take me long to get comfortable, obviously, but it was like, wow, I actually have Black professors. Wow, like coaches are actually Black, like
Hmm.
administrators, deans. I only had one Black educator coming up, and I want to say she was maybe second. No, she was between fourth and sixth grade. I want to say Miss Hicks was probably fifth or fourth grade, but it's the only time I had a Black teacher. So now you come to college and every professor, from what I can recall, was Black.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was incredible. It was
Yeah.
absolutely incredible to have professors say, like, listen, this is what the book says, but I'm going to tell you what really happened. And you're like, whoa, like this is amazing. So that on the academic side, it was incredible. It was a lot of work because as a transfer, I had to work my butt off. I was doing, I think, like 17 hours
Mm. The
graduate.
student athlete,
Yes,
17 hours. Wow.
yes, to graduate in those 2 years, because
Whew.
initially I was going into sports medicine.
Okay.
But a lot of the credits and all of that, as they don't tell you, don't transfer, right?
Yeah.
So I decided to get a sociology degree with a minor in social work because we still talk, my academic advisor, who's now a dean, was like, I think this is something you should explore. I think you would like it. And so I had someone guiding me in that direction as much as possible. But when you talk about the student athlete dynamic,
Yeah.
it was a different level of competition. Yes, JUCO was an introduction to college life and
Right.
college sports, physically, mentally. But being at a D1 university, I was the first class to graduate with Cookman, converting from a college to university. But the
Mm.
level of competition
Yeah.
and the practice and the early morning gym and running around the entire campus as a warm up, I was like, what is wrong with these people?
Yeah.
And having to balance going to class and getting that done. So it was a huge transition for me.
Yeah.
But to add on to that, to talk specifically about, to add on to mental health, to talk about transitioning, was the coach that helped me get to Bethune-Cookman passed away the last month of my volleyball career.
Mm.
So now I'm losing the sport, right?
Yeah.
The coach that we became best friends, still close to her family to this day. And now I'm like, wow, everything to this point that got me in this chapter of my life is gone.
Hold on. Hold on.
It's gone.
Based on everything that you said, adjustments, transition is just written all over it. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm talking about you being a military, growing up in the military, family military, you
Mhm.
say military brat, is that how you?
You can, yeah, Army
Yeah,
brat. You can
army
say
brat,
that.
army brat. From transitioning to JUCO, junior college, to a Division 1, the JUCO environment, the culture there, the shock, as far as the culture there, the shock at a HBCU, dealing with not familiar or not aware, but just not used to
Yeah, you had
seeing
an
Black
experience.
professors.
Mhm. It was an unusual experience.
Unusual.
Absolutely. Mhm.
So I'm sorry, I just had to stop right there because it's just all written all over
Yeah, it is.
this
And when
journey.
you're going through that, you don't pay attention, right? And so
Yeah.
when you look at all 4 years, I look at all the moments that allowed me to build and develop the foundation that I'm on now. So my freshman year, I'm not going to give someone a label, but I will definitely say my head coach my freshman year was a part of those microaggressions.
Mm,
So you talk about where can players go and have conversation,
yeah.
was nowhere. She was white. The team was majority white. You're having a coach that's saying, stay away from the football team. Let's read between the lines. The football team is Black men.
Hmm.
My team is majority white.
Right.
So it was all of this. And there was one lady that we recently connected on Facebook, Miss Rose, who helped me find a church. So I started going to her church home.
Mm,
So even in that moment, Because I grew up in a church, you know, that's what I knew. But when you're in college and you're in a small town, you don't know where to go. So I
Yeah.
didn't have that connection. It was much later, I think, because you're only there for 2 years. So I
Yeah.
look at that spiritual connection that I was able to find some solace in that. And I was a basketball player. Her and I went to church together. And then you get to the latter side of being at Cookman. Once my coach passed away, I made the decision to get baptized in college. So you're having a transition, getting ready to graduate, leaving the sport, literally feeling lost because that was the first time I experienced a death as an adult.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Very heavy. Shortly after that, I believe there were other deaths that happened in my family, but it
Yeah.
was like the first one, and it was like, whoa,
Right.
what? And she
This
was
was
young.
after your first year
No,
at
this was my senior year. This was my
your
senior
senior year. Okay, so
year.
you didn't. A new coach hasn't came in. You haven't experienced being coached by a new at Bethune-Cookman.
Well, so transition. Let's transition to Cookman. So all that happened at Independence,
Okay.
got out of there, got to Cookman.
Got it.
So yeah, the junior year was a tough adjustment,
Yeah.
obviously, because it was just like, okay, this is a different game. Like you really got to fight for your spot to
Right.
start. Because you got freshmen, sophomores that have been here and put in their work, and now you're coming in talking about you want to start. So that was a kind of a different experience. And around that time, so I was dealing with grief really both years because she was diagnosed with cancer,
Mhm.
like the summer of me going into Cookman. So she
Wow.
fought it for about a year and a half, and I would be
Okay.
able to go back and visit her and do things like that. But going into my senior year, in the last season, in the last month, is when she passed. So literally, I'm exiting the game, and to tell you how to explain how close that grief was, and talk about the transition and why in this season our programs for our coaches, our players need to do a better job with supporting all athletes, but specifically making sure they have resources for Black athletes. Because
Right.
when we think about death and how we push through and how you don't really take time to really process that because of what's needed and what's necessary. So in my situation, we made it to MEAC, right? So, excuse me. So we flew to, I think, Virginia as a team. I then got on another plane and went to my coach's funeral,
Mm.
right? Came back in time to play, and my coach didn't play me in the last game of my career,
Oh,
right? And
man.
so literally everything that
That
I
hurts.
devastated,
That
everything that I
hurts.
put into this sport,
Yeah.
none of it mattered. It was all gone just like that.
Man.
So so the exit out of it was now what I now know to be grief. It was definitely depression.
Yeah.
There was just, what was the reason, right? And thankfully I had a great teammate that was kind of pushing, like, dude, you have to graduate. Like, this is an option. Like, I was like, I'm not going to class. I'm going to watch Cat Williams. Let's see what the View is talking about. Like, I lost all motivation. Why? Because the structure of my day and my life, I was in control of it. And up to that
Mm.
point, I never had that. You have
Yeah.
practice, you have film, you have study hall, everything was structured. And now I had none of that. And so when I talk about comparing my grief in that moment to what our players are going through now with the pandemic and with the racial injustice and all of that, I had no one ever in administrative and staff, because my coach definitely knew, the team definitely knew, but obviously this is the coach's responsibility, right? That no one ever came and checked to see how you're doing. Is there anything we can do for you? So imagine our players right now who are losing parents, who
Mm.
are losing,
Yeah.
siblings and best friends and teammates, but yet now they're having to deliver food to take care of their family. They're having to give up the sport because they have to help their mom bring in some income or raise their kids. So when you're looking at the Black experience, who we know that the pandemic is affecting greatly, who
Yeah.
is taking time to have a conversation and support them and really tap into what's going on. And I think that's where, with my company, we talk about value the athlete beneath the jersey. You have to
Yes.
see the human side of things. You have to see that the reality that the game is, great and it's what I do, but please care about who I am, what keeps me going. And if that is my family and I'm losing that, and you just see the player, but you don't see the person.
Mm.
And I feel that in some places, when you are Black, and let alone a Black woman, you are
Mhm.
expected to maneuver and shift and adjust and push through and get over, just on your own, versus being in other situations, you might have more resources. People might be quick to check on you and to say, and to feel more that they can approach you easier and give excuses. Oh, well, you look like you didn't want to talk. Oh, well, you look like you're doing well. You know, that's the issue. And that was mine. There was nothing that, and I was at a HBCU. So yes, I think that, you know, I love my school as much as possible. And I know that it has improved, but that was a major thing that I know a lot of schools, a lot of athletes are experiencing now more than ever. So when you talk about the transition out of that,
Yeah.
all of this mess that I had to figure out on my own, because I wasn't a social worker yet. So
Yeah.
that was my transition in all of this coming out of an athlete, because I was a machine, as we all are. You play a game, you go to class, you go to practice. You play a game, you go to class, you go to practice. And you tell everybody, oh, it's great, right? And people assume that you're doing well because you're an athlete and it's status. And there's no question. So also being in an HBCU, it prepared me for the world. But on the flip side of that, there were things that I was aware of, but again, I had to experience it to kind of get tough out in the real world. Or not even the real, I don't like saying that, in the next chapter of my life. Because being an athlete can be the real world, but you are shielded from a lot, and let alone being an all Black team, you know, it can be a little different, but it definitely still prepared me to be strong and believe in myself and the commitment to see things through.
Right. You spoke on so much. The resilience piece is huge. We take pride in it historically. You know, that's how our image and how we portray it is being a resilient community, African community. However, what comes with that? You know, what is taken away? What is being damaged? Of being always being considered a strong Black woman. Great tagline, but are we acknowledging the hurt and the pain that comes along with that? The mix of the pandemic and the Black experience as a student athlete.
Yeah.
Could you explain like why and how is it difficult for a lot of student athletes, particularly Black women student athletes, to transition? We hear a lot about Black male student athletes, and particularly in those revenue generated sports, basketball, football, track, that have a difficult time transitioning during this phase in their life. But what about Black women particularly?
You know, that's really my research. So I'm excited to find out, you know, concrete data about that, because I'm focusing on Black female collegiate athletes and that transition out, and the emotional and psychological impact of that specifically. And the criteria is very particular, but that's the base of it. What I can tell you as far as the research that I've done, along with my lived experience and close friends and teammates, is that when you're playing in the sport, and I can even apply it obviously to now, as a Black female athlete, the intersections of that experience really can lead to identity suppression, meaning that at the top of that hierarchy, you are an athlete. So have you ever in your life as an athlete explored or embraced who you are as a woman, who you are as a Black woman, right? And so if you haven't, this forced you to. All the protest forced you to kind of take off that Band-Aid that people don't really want to talk about, or people don't want to hear, or they don't know how to ask you, or you don't believe that it's even valid or has value in having a conversation about questions that are being asked. Because when I played, who was I going to tell that I'm tired of you asking why my hair is longer than your one best friend that, you know, whatever. And I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with saying that's a dumb question. Or I don't feel comfortable with saying, like, do you understand that that makes me uncomfortable? You never feel empowered to do that because you don't feel empowered about yourself. And I think that comes from media, that comes from generations of telling you to just push through, that this is the norm, this is the expected, or to be thankful that you just made it and that you're here. And because you're a woman, it's like, okay, I'm really beating the odds. because when you think about the hierarchy of gender and race, Black women are at the bottom. When we talk of Black men, white men, white men and white women, Black women are at the bottom. And so there's so many layers that you have to break through. So sometimes, and I'm speaking from my experience at this, it's easier to just go along to get along sometimes. You're kind of, don't ruffle the feathers, don't ask too many questions, just make it happen. Because when you call to get a little consultation from certain people, whether they're especially older generations, it's a different mindset, right? Some still believe that women shouldn't be in certain positions, that you should know your place. Like, why are you not doing this? Or you should do that. And it's just like, wow, that's because I'm a woman, and because you've lived through the racial the racial injustice, and you've seen the growth. You're just we just want you to be safe. It can come from a safety standpoint, but so much stigma around that shapes and puts an image on us as Black women. So we talk about angry Black woman. Even when you talk about Black girl magic, it was an event I went to that really kind of opened my eyes. So I love Black girl magic, don't get me wrong, but I do think that as Black women, we have to be careful with the narratives that we support and feed in. Meaning that Black girl magic means that something like a supernatural, no matter what, we make it happen. We push, like we make it look good.
Good, yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm like everybody else. I went to school. I need to sleep. I need to eat. If you give her one task or him one task, why are you giving me 10? But Black girl magic says that I come out shining and I make it work no matter what. And despite what people say or what they do, I show up. And even though that can be the case, it can put a layer or stigma or a burden on us. So we do have to be mindful of that. And so I look at athletes now and different sports, and just not feeling that they can have a voice to share that, right? If you have people that are, I had, I won't say what school, but there was a male administrator who made me uncomfortable, like comments and just stares and looks. But it's like, do I want to lose my scholarship? This is a person of power. He said, she said, will it, am I going to be the one that's gone, or he's going to be the one that's gone? And it happens to be a white male. So you look at that dynamic. So there's so many things that make the transition and the experience, not even the experience, because then that feeds over into the next chapter when you get into the professional world. Having a voice as a Black woman can sometimes create consequences and outcomes that we don't foresee that would not have it for anyone else. With always being usually the only woman, the only Black woman, or even woman of color, I got to a point in my career where I said, you know what, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to wear and dress how I want to dress, still professional, right? Yeah. But I no longer allowed the outside to tell me what I should look like, what my hair should look like. So at a very young age, I started to develop that idea of what was acceptable, what was approachable, what allowed outside people to be comfortable. And that carried on with me for years. So I think as a student athlete, you really got to tap into who you are outside of the sport early on. So that's getting involved in organizations that are not athlete based. That is, I know it's hard, but getting involved with internships and really finding those opportunities, because I had none of that. I was strictly an athlete, a student athlete, but still I was an athlete. We use the acronym student athlete, and historically we can hear where that comes from, but that wasn't my mindset. Sports came first. Yeah, I went to class and had good grades, but the game was what mattered the most. And it was tough, but I think that's what's making it tough. To answer your question initially, is that they're having to unveil those identities that it's easier to suppress because there's been no platform to talk about it, and it's just easier sometimes not to talk about it.
I love that. Just the you explaining what identity suppress and what does that mean in the context of Black women student athletes, and what does that mean? What does that look like? Their voice not being heard, the stigmas the cultural titles that bring invitation to burdens and continuing burdens, and not really having the platform to voice, these burdens. And in transitioning, it can be difficult because it has an effect on your psyche, your mindset, and how you perceive yourself, and the direction that you should take, because of what you've allowed to affect and influence how you think about yourself. I think that's really good. And since we here, what can intercollegiate athletic departments do to help and assist Black women student athletes when it comes to transitioning out of sport, when it comes to finding their identity, when it comes to creating a platform for them to talk about some of these issues that they're experiencing?
No, I'm glad you asked that. A big thing that we are pushing right now with my company is talking to, staff within collegiate departments and explaining that the process of transition starts as soon as they come in their freshman year, right? So I do a lot of workshops, a lot of professional development. And what I explain to them, the first thing I say is I'm not a one-stop shop. It does no benefit to your players to bring me in one time and they never see me again. You need someone that is visible, that is supportive, that is an extension of your department. And the reason for that is the transition starts because they're adjusting coming out of high school, but you have to understand that player's lived experience. If you think about my experience coming from Alaska to Kansas, never once did we have a sit down to learn about each other's background. Not even, do you have siblings? Where are you from? Like, that was just stuff you learned about each other in the locker room or with your roommate, and things of that nature. But I explained that in preseason, that is the season of development. You talk about the family, but I don't know my relatives over here, my teammates, they're supposed to be family. I don't know anything about them. And so, I talk about that needs to be that moment. You should have curriculum and events, and not just guest speakers, but you should actually have curriculum focus on activities and preparation for transitioning into college, identifying some of their goals, understanding the dynamics, understanding, like, is this the one kid that made it? Were they the Michael Jordan or the Cheryl Swoops or the Serena Williams or the Naomi Osaka of their town, right? And now coming into this chapter and saying, what does this look like? Or was this a kid that comes from lineage of athletes? Or was this someone, you just need to know their experience. So that's the first time, that's the first place the ball is dropped, that we expect you just to come in and to jump. And I was watching Dawn Staley talk, and she's explaining that when she got to her university, that she was just quiet. She kind of laid low, stayed in the background, and her academic struggle because she didn't know or didn't feel comfortable asking questions or where to go, and just didn't, it was out of her norm. You go from an all Black community and now you are a minority and everybody sees it. And so that is what happens to a lot of our players. So the schools and the departments need to acknowledge that. They need to be a place for it. And you need to have integrated content and opportunities for your Black athletes, but you also need to have events and opportunities for Black females and Black men, because we have to understand that there are certain experiences and conversations that they're not going to want to have in front of each other. And that's okay. So when I talk to these schools, like we have some events coming up where I'm just speaking to just Black male athletes, and the deans and they are supportive of that. They understand that. And the same thing for Black women, or even when I teach, I still explain that I will identify when I'm talking about Black male athletes and data, or when I'm talking about Black females, or get their input. You have to be able to share and listen about, let them tell you what they need or what works and what doesn't work. Because just because I have something doesn't mean it's a cookie cutter image for all the players. So that's the first thing. Have something from the beginning that's planned from arrival to the point of graduation, so that we understand graduation is the ultimate goal, right? Sometimes we know we got to do that, but we're just focusing on the games, practice, weights, and that's kind of in the long run. But no, the graduation is the component that we are the factor that we're trying to get to. So I think that is the main thing that we're missing and we're not having. I'm so glad to see so many Black student athlete groups develop over this from this past summer. I've connected with quite a few of them. I interviewed woke athletes from Bryant University, and combination of football players, volleyball players, all Black, that created a space, and their athletic department was supportive of that. And so that's what you need. You can't say, oh, it's only for Black people. Well, that's not fair. Well, your whole university is for white people. So what do you want us to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the real conversations you have to have.
Yeah.
But the adults, the professionals in those spaces and leadership need to make sure that you do your own work. So I think that's the other part of it too. Administration needs to do their own work about their own implicit bias, and understand, what have you lived through? What were you like when you played? That now, what were your coaches saying, or what did you hear about your Black teammates, or Black women, and policing Black female bodies? And what was that? Simple as, oh, she runs fast because she's Black, or she does her hair because all Black girls do her hair. Like little things that you just said. You got to do some work, because now you're projecting that onto your coaches, you're projecting that onto your players, and it's not okay. And so I think that's the work that needs to be done. But you can't have these conversations in an all white circle, because none of you are Black, and none of you are Black women or Black men. So I think that is what people need to understand as far as Black women. And it makes me just think about Rutgers. And when Don Imus said what he said, right? You have someone in a position that was able to broadcast this. Shout out to Coach Vivian. I don't know her personally, but hey, you know what I'm saying? She's amazing. But when you have a coach and a department that supports and stands for you, it makes a whole difference. And I always talk in the administrative talk. This helps you. This helps your recruitment. This helps your business. If you want to talk about like that, like we can look at the business side of it too, because it is a business, but also understand that we are developing and supporting people. And I would imagine for those young women at that time, that was such a huge blow and a force to recognize. It don't matter if we're at one of the biggest universities, one of the best programs in the world, I am still a Black woman.
Right.
So that's the conversation that needs to be had, but they need to be with people who are equipped and credentialed in that space. And that's also a problem, that you're bringing folks in that really don't know what they're talking about, or they're only sharing information they read in a book. You need people that have walked the walk, that can talk the talk, and that are relatable. I don't talk to people, I speak with them. So it's a huge, huge difference as far as a shift of growth, and I can speak that because based on the data we get back from the workshops, the surveys, that is what the difference is. It's interactive. They're able to share, they're able to vent, and what they're living through right now, even though I'm not in school in the midst of all that's going on in the world, it's still almost the same thing. And that's what's mind blowing. And so the schools need to do better work with bringing people in. You have the money, so don't act like you don't. And provide the resources, right? I'd rather you spend money on something to build me emotionally, mentally, and spiritually than I would for these extra pair of warm-ups. And I believe that, because you can get that. But that's the other side of it too. Quit being stingy with the money, and I'll just leave it at that.
Quit being stingy with the money. Man, that was an abundant wealth of knowledge and recommendation. When I hear your response to the assistance in helping student athletes transition, I go back to the first question I asked you about, like, your job and your purpose. You gave us like your journey and what helped you. And you said something about the embodiment. You embody what your work. You live out your work. And I just want to reiterate or provide something for everybody to, for you to bring back those small little things that you said throughout the interview, but all into one. Like, what helped you make these transitions? Because you had a lot of transitions, a lot of adjustments that a lot of people have probably never experienced or will not experience in their lifetime. But yet you're doing so well. You did so well as a student athlete at 2 different levels. You experienced pain, and you also experienced the fame and the glory of being a student athlete. And now you at the, working hard to get this PhD and balancing all this. So what worked for you?
So I'll say this, there's no plan that works for everyone. You have to go through the dark times, the valleys to get where you are. So my first thing is don't give up. Don't give up.
Yeah.
The tough times pay off in the end. The experiences matter, even if it seems like you are in this tunnel and you cannot get out. Push through, because I promise you it has a reward for you at the end. Talking about all the sports transitions and then getting into the professional world. I was in healthcare for about 10 years. So I talk about graduating and then 10 years out of grad. So I graduated from Cookman. Then I went to UCF 2 years and got my master's. And then after that, I started working in healthcare, and I stayed with that company for 10 years between 3 different hospitals. So another transition, get the degree, entry level to administration. So when I talk about the shifts and the dark times, that was hard. I never imagined I really prepared for a career. So in 10 years, I experienced very similar situations that I experienced as a player, as far as racism, microaggressions, walking into a room and being the only Black person or Black woman, having questions about my hair, watching men eye me up and down as I walked into a room. And it's like, do I say anything because I want my job, you know? All of this. So everything that I went through, unfortunately, as an athlete, as a Black woman, guess what? I experienced it again in the professional space. And so I tried for years to find another job. And I now know that that just wasn't the plan that God had for me. I had to push through. It wasn't easy. There were days where I just was like, Lord, I cannot get out of bed today. I just can't. I can't do it today. I can't go to work today. It wasn't easy. But and I hit a phase, and to be honest, I hit a phase of burnout. And if you don't know what burnout is, please do your research and listen to your body. I was getting so sick. I was passing out at work, passing out at flea markets, because I was not taking, like, going to flea markets on Sunday is a big thing in Orlando. But anyways, and so I was not taking care of myself, and I wasn't listening. There was no self-care, where you asked me earlier. There was none of that. I had friendships and relationships where I was pouring everything into them, and my job required me to be on call 24/7 for the hospital. So I could be getting a call at 3 o'clock in the morning that it requires me to get out of bed, get dressed, and go see why my mental health patient broke the window with a fire extinguisher, hit 2 employees, and ran from the facility. Now I'm up with law enforcement, trying to be, all this stuff. So that was my job, in a vicious cycle for 10 years of working with mental health, substance abuse, and medical complications. So it was a lot.
Yeah.
And then you think about not having people pour back into you like you're pouring into them and supporting you and all of that. I got away from the church because my schedule did not, in my opinion, didn't permit it. But I know in reality, you make time for things that you know are important. So all of that, I finally left that field because my doctor told me, if you don't quit, you will have a heart attack in 6 months. I was in, my late 20s at that time, on high blood pressure medication, and it was all stress related. So I left that job on faith, literally. Not a job lined up, not apartment lined up. I was just like, I need to figure something else out. So that's where I learned about faith like I've never had to, where you trust the process. So I can't sugarcoat it and say, oh, you go through that and no, I literally had nothing. I literally walked out of that job. They were not happy. But I felt that I was worth more.
Yeah.
And, based on everything that I had went through with race, I had people say lynched in a joking way to me. I had grown men that were white men that would say derogatory things and yell at me as if I was 2. And I got to the point in my development where I'm going to say something back. It doesn't have to be unprofessional. I don't have to do all what you think I'm going to do, but I learned how to handle things in the professional sector and still have my value and set boundaries. And so part of that was taking care of myself. So I leave that job. I was so thankful. God blessed me with being a regional director for a tutoring program, which is also college readiness. So I traveled between South Florida, Dallas, and Houston, and managed a tutoring centers and really learned about K through 12. And that's where I believe God started to pour back into me, was something someone had told me years ago, was that you need to run your own business.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how. I didn't believe in myself. That just wasn't a part of the conversation. So that's where the light bulb let me see the leverage as an athlete. That's where I saw that people that honestly didn't want to shake my hand, they were willing to have a conversation with me when I said I was a former D1 player. Oh. So
they want to talk to you then.
Yeah, And you learn about marketing. I'm like, oh, let me put my jersey in the back. Let
Marketing,
me put my
yes.
play cards here. Let me put my
Yeah.
degrees up. And so the leverage of an athlete was so huge. So I tell those that are playing now, start to learn that and recognize that.
Yeah.
I use it in interviews. I make sure people understand that I'm more than that. But for people who never made it to college sports, they're like, oh, you play in Division I. Oh, so you da. So I learned that in that realm. And then God said my time had served there, and I ended up becoming a director for a rehab program. And I'm telling you all this because everything built on the next.
Yeah.
So then I go into another program where my department are educators. So I learned how to develop curriculum. I learned what teachers learn in school because I was learning from my staff.
Yeah.
I learned how to develop exams and the format and ordering supplies. And, I learned how to create a school basically. Where else would I get that from? So now I have that. I'd get accepted into my school. Now I'm doing the research and I tap into this and I say, oh my God, sports and social, this is a thing. Join an organization. And then literally everything that I've said and that I lived came together. So
Wow.
everything I've
Yeah.
done in my business
Yeah.
with curriculum development, developing workshops, creating surveys, the content, training staff, having department meetings or team meetings with my staff, all
Yeah.
of this stuff I did professionally. So when I say push through, get the support that you need, take care of yourself. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to take time for yourself. I do believe that God provides in every area. I've been fired from jobs for it was racial discrimination, but did I have the money to fight it? No. But did I get what I needed from that job? And was I ignoring that it was my time to leave? That was the program where I developed teachers. Unfortunately, I'm a person that's ethical. And that was a situation where you realize, wow, there are people out here that really don't have good intentions, but I got everything I needed to have. And it had been pulling at me to start my own business, but I was too scared and I didn't really know how to do it.
Yeah.
So trust the process. Things will be done that are not right, that are unethical, that seem like the world is against you. But literally, it has given me everything that I need to develop the foundation on where I am. So, in social work, we talk about creating a tool belt. And so that is your life experiences that you have. So I now have a tool belt that's too big for my waist, but I literally have a tool that I can pull from every situation, whether it's a person, it's an experience, it's just the knowledge of knowing where to look and who to ask that brought me to where I am now.
Yeah.
That's honestly how I got the name, the BFCA experience. So if you see my shirt,
Yes.
it says Black Female Collegiate Athlete. That's what BFCA stands for. And that's because in that chapter of my life is where the foundation was developed. A lot of the skills, a lot of the challenges, a lot of the heartbreaks, the resiliency, all of that was developed in that chapter. And because of the BFCA experience, I've been able to go in many avenues that I would never plan, talk to people I would have never talked to, and impact lives that I didn't know I had the ability to impact. So that's how we've gotten where we are. So just trust the journey. I promise you, because trust me, I'm going to be higher and higher eventually. It's just the beginning, but it had to happen this way. And I'm glad I didn't give up. I'm glad I didn't.
Incredible. From your pain, from your experiences, your heartaches, trials, the good, the ups and the downs, you found a way to put it all together. The skill sets that you have gained and soaked up from different industries that came together. You found a way to develop something that can help others. And I think that's incredible. The fact that you had, over time, you pushed through and you found a way to put it all together. And through all of that, others can benefit from that. And I just want to highlight that some of the things that you said, just this experience of being a student athlete, sports, being an athlete, it's almost like a microcosm of life. The things that you experienced, you're probably going to experience later on, but because you experienced it in college, you probably be more prepared for those type of situations, and also to leverage opportunities using the glitz and the glam or the title of an athlete, you know that people gravitate towards that. So how can you help use that as a leverage to help you and push yourself and pushing through it in faith, not allowing that to bypass you, that's also something that's important to you, and you recognize how important that is throughout your life. Continue to keep that, because it's going to help you push through. Yeah. And so thank you so much. I mean, you explained your business LLC, the BFCA, what it stands for, what it encompasses. And so with that being said, we're going to conclude this interview. But before I conclude this interview, I know there's a lot of people just dying to reach out to you. How can she's so much wealth and knowledge. I would love to connect with her. So just let the people know, how can they reach you? What's the best way to reach you? Social media, email?
Yeah, well, the easiest way is my website. So it's my name. It's www.marleneholmes.com. So MarleneHolmes.com. And everything is there. You can select the contact option and send a message to us. It'll obviously come to my team, and we'll get back to you typically within 24 hours. You can email me at bfcateam@gmail.com. My Instagram is _BFCA_experience. And let us know. We do workshops for really anyone, student athletes, former. I've worked with organizations that have, children come as, let's say, if it's a youth center or a rec center. We've done mental health organizations for their staff with providing care. I'm a certified meditation instructor as well. So we've done virtual meditation events. We've been very blessed to basically be able to accommodate anyone that contacts us or point you in the right direction for that matter. But curriculum development, workshops for athletes, just let us know. We are definitely picking up with this season, so we're super excited with all the schools that we'll be working on. If you go to our website, you can see some of our past clients as well. What else? Oh, have to promote the shirts. So please check us out and get your shirt. We are expanding our men's line. So right now we have a former Black female collegiate athlete, future, and then we have one without the former that represents those are currently playing. So Black female collegiate athlete. We have some shirts up for the men right now, but we'll eventually get former, and everyone will have the same options, and we'll have some other shirts coming in the future. And all that is on the website. So please reach out. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story in such detail. Hope I didn't talk too much. And for the students and those that will see this, I wish you the best, but please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions, because this process is not easy, but you can get to a place where you can be your authentic self, no matter what that is. And I'm thankful to say that I'm that now.
There you have it. Thank you, Marlene. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time, taking the time to do this. Thank you, listeners and students, for tuning in the African American in Sports podcast, and see you next time.